Hi, everyone. My name is Zoe. I am WCN's program manager. Thank you so much for joining us for the first evening edition of the Closer Look. So before we get started, I just want to remind you to use the chat and the Q&A feature to submit your questions throughout the video. The video will also be recorded and posted on YouTube by next week. You can also activate auto captioning with the caption button along the bottom of your screen. So I'm going to go through a brief intro of our guest speaker, and then he's going to take it away. We're very happy to have you here. And we have Marc, who is the co-founder of Hutan and the scientific director of the Kinabatangan Orangutan Conservation Program. This is a conservation-based program that is active in wildlife research, conservation, and community development in Sabah since 1998. Marc has a vet degree from Mason's Alfort in France and a PhD from Berlin Free University. So the first aim when they started Hutan, the first aim of the project was to investigate whether it's possible at all, and if possible, how can orangutans survive in degraded habitats and multiple use landscapes throughout the state. But what they realized immediately after starting this project is that in order to protect and save the orangutans living in Kinabatangan and in Borneo, and what they have to do is a holistic approach that involves making sure that the needs of the local communities are taken care of. So today, Team Hutan is made up of about more than 60 local research assistants. All of these are local people from the villages. And I had the pleasure of meeting some of the team members when I visited Hutan last June. So Marc and his team, they work tirelessly towards ensuring the peaceful existence of wildlife and people outside of protected areas, and especially in palm oil dominated landscapes. So Marc, please tell us what initiatives you guys are using to try and achieve this lofty goal. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Zoe, for this kind of introduction. Thanks to all of you to be with me today. I know it's late where you are. It's quite early where I am. Last time I did this kind of event, it was 2 o'clock in the morning for me. So we decided to switch a little bit. So yeah, for the next 1 hour or so, I'm going to explain to you a little bit what we are trying to do in Kinabatangan, what are our aspirations, and also to show you a little bit the situation on the ground and what is happening to this species, to the orangutan. Some of the information I'm going to share with you is quite new. It has never been really published yet. And so you will be one of the first group of people to hear about this. So Hutan is a French NGO that was created by Dr. Isabelle Lachman and myself in 1994, so about 30 years ago. And for the past 25 years, Hutan has been working with the Sabah Wildlife Department to establish a project in Kinabatangan to deal with biodiversity conservation. Something, okay, sorry, yes, it's here. Okay, something that I realized over the years is that conservation requires a lot of people. When we started in 98,
Marc, just a note.
Yes?
I don't think you started sharing your screen yet.
Really? Oh, come on. Sorry for that.
No problem.
It's a shame. Okay, we do it again because it used to be. Oh, God. Okay, we do it again. Share screen. This one. What about now?
Perfect.
Okay, sorry for that, guys. And thank you, Zoe, to have told me, because for me, it was working fine on my side. So anyway, what I said is that conservation is requiring a lot of people. So we started 25 years ago, where only 5 of us. Today, it's more than 100, 120 people. And all of the researchers at Hutan, they are all from the local community. They are all villagers who have been trained to do the work. They are extremely dedicated to protect and to manage their resources. So today you see only one of our staff, myself. I'm just one face of Hutan, but seriously, the people who are on the ground, the villagers who are making our project are the real, untold, true heroes of the story. You have to come over to meet with them. It's always super inspiring to meet with the team and to see why and how they do the work. So over the years, we have, of course, diversified our approach, and we really want now to embrace a holistic approach to conservation. So sure enough, we want to protect a species like the orangutan or like the elephant and other species. We need to understand their ecology. So we do a lot of research. So we have a team dealing with orangutan research, dealing with elephant, dealing with hornbill and so forth. But research is not sufficient. We need to really use the result of the research to design better strategies. So we have another team doing wildlife surveys. We want to understand how biodiversity is faring in this landscape. Kinabatangan, I'm going to introduce to you very soon. A team of extremely dedicated women who are doing reforestation and forest restoration only. And this is very, very tough work, but they do an extremely amazing job. Wildlife warden is a team of people who are enforcing the law, meaning that we are protecting and patrolling the area. We are also dealing with swiftlet, so protecting a limestone area where swiftlet used to be poached for the traditional soup, Chinese soup. A team, of course, doing a lot of education and awareness, not only in Kinabatangan, but all over Sabah. And actually, this team is very important because they're also using the results collected in the field to bring this information to the people in school, in villages, but also we use that to try to inform policymakers, both in Malaysia and internationally. Something I have learned over the years as well, I have learned a lot actually by being a conservationist, is that conservation is all about people, not really about wildlife. It's all about engaging with people. So we work a lot with local NGOs, a couple of groups like Seratu Hatai dealing with elephants as well. Maybe some of you know Dr. Farina because she has been invited by WCN a couple of times. Gaia dealing with hornbill. Local communities I had mentioned, as I mentioned, is very, very important to us. State agencies, you cannot do conservation without getting the full support of the government, and unlikely partners such as members from the oil palm industry. And I'm going to talk about this very, very soon. So you all know what is an orangutan. If you are here tonight with me, it's because you have an interest on the species. Well, without going into too much details, personally, this orangutan, this species has changed my life. I used to work in Africa in a previous life with chimps, with gorillas. And then once I visited Borneo and I met these animals, and I was just taken aback by what I saw. At this time, I didn't really understand anything about the Bornean rainforest, about the orangutan. But what I knew is that they were critically endangered. And so we decided, Isabel and myself, to do something to try to spend our life in a way to try to save them. I'm sure you know that today we have 3 orangutan species. So 2 are found in Sumatra. And 1 species is found in Borneo, and the species in Borneo is split into 3 different subspecies. The Kinabatangan I'm going to talk about is located in Sabah. You see in the map here, Sabah is the northern part of the island of Borneo, and it belongs to Malaysia. Borneo being split in 3 different countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. And the subspecies we are working with is called Pongopingmus morio. So here is a picture of Isabel, the first time we visited Sabah. And as I said, we visited the state and we visited Kinabatangan, which is in the eastern side of the state of Sabah. And this is what we saw at this time: a beautiful river, amazing forest, and amazing wildlife. So this was really something that seduced us a lot, but also at the same time, we realized that this place had been transformed entirely by human activities, a lot of logging activities in the 70s, 80s, and then in the 80s, 90s, a lot of this land, a lot of the floodplain had been replaced with oil palm plantation and other types of crops. And we saw this kind of landscape that is hugely transformed by people, where you still have a bit of forest. And amazingly enough, the Kinabatangan is a hotspot for biodiversity as of today. Even 10 primate species like the proboscis monkeys here, the western tarsier, we have more than 450 species of birds, and a lot of small critters like these horny frogs. And of course, one of my favorite, maybe my favorite, these guys. We have about 200 Bornean elephants in Kinabatangan. And this is what really seduced us. The fact that we were in an ecosystem that was hugely transformed, hugely fragmented, degraded, but still there was a lot of wildlife there. And since the beginning at Hutan, we really wanted to work at the interface between people and wildlife. And for us, to see Kinabatangan was really the place we wanted to study. We really wanted to look at how people and wildlife, in this case, orangutan, elephants, and so forth, sun bear, and so forth, they could coexist. First question we tried to answer, as Zoe said, was to know if orangutan were able to survive in degraded forest. Why? Because 30 years ago, scientists were not convinced that orangutan could adapt to habitat disturbance. So the first thing we did with the Sabah Wildlife Department was to create a Kinabatangan Orangutan Conservation Project that became a program. And then we hired a bunch of villagers to do the research. And here we are. We entered the forest and we followed wild orangutan. As a scientist, I really believed in science-based conservation, although science is only a small part of our work, but science needs to be done very, very well if we really want to develop conservation strategies that have a chance to succeed. So we train villagers to become researchers, and some of them have been working with us for more than 25 years now. I think that they're the best orangutan trackers in the world. I mean, can you imagine to spend 25 years of your life on a daily basis to go to the forest and follow orangutans? You become extremely good at it. And you know what? It's a very, very, very difficult and frustrating job, because to find an orangutan in the forest is very difficult, first of all. And most of the time you don't find them. You are just there and you are enjoying the pleasure of mosquitoes, leeches, the rain, and this and that, and you don't see anything. And once you have found an orangutan, more than half of the time you don't see anything at all because they are hiding in the trees. And it's a really, really frustrating way, I mean, to spend your life, actually. To study orangutan is very difficult. Personally, I have learned a couple of things from them. First of all, patience. As I said, it's super difficult to find an orangutan. It's super difficult to collect information. So you have to be super duper patient. And humility. Why humility? Well, once an orangutan is fully habituated to our presence, to the human presence, they stop paying attention to us, which is, to my knowledge, the only great apes doing this. I used to work, as I said earlier, with gorillas and chimps in the wild in Africa. And you are always part of their social game, not the orangutan. When the orangutan has decided that you are not a threat anymore, he resumes his activities, his orangutan life, and that's it. And you are not part of it anymore. So you spend your life sitting on the ground, looking up to the tree, trying to see the orangutan, and he doesn't pay attention to you at all. Yeah, if you want to do, if we want to be a good orangutan researcher, we have to be super, super humble. And 25 years of research with orangutan have taught us a lot, of course, but seriously, if you ask me, to me, they are still a big question mark, because the orangutan are so different than other great apes, are so different than us. Here, for example, you have Jenny. It's one of the female orangutan that we have been following for 25 years. Unfortunately, she passed a couple of years ago because of her old age, but we were able to follow her, and she was the introduction to the orangutan kingdom for us. And over the years, she produced more than 6 babies, and we are now following our our last daughter. And as I said, we have been following these animals a lot, but it's so difficult to understand what they think, for example. Their way of communication, completely different than gorillas or chimpanzees. I think they are using their eyes a lot, but it's not something we as humans are able to really understand, because this is not our prime way to communicate. And so you see them sitting on trees, thinking of what, thinking about what. This is what we don't know. So to me, this orangutan, even if I have spent so much time with them, are still a big mystery to me. Here again, they taught me how to be humble. It's not because you spend 25 years with them that you're gonna understand them necessarily. Something we understood, though, is that orangutan are able to adapt to habitat disturbance, and they are thriving in what we call disturbed forest. And this is important to know, because as of today, 90% of the orangutan population in Borneo are living in forests that have been exploited by people. Primary forest on the island is almost gone, and orangutan are found in disturbed forest, but it doesn't really matter to them as long as they are not hunted. It doesn't really matter, because they can find a lot of food in disturbed forest, and they will adjust their behavior and their social structure and everything. For example, something that nobody really realized before is that orangutan are walking on the ground much more than what we thought. The reason why people didn't know that before is because when you are following them, they don't want to come down to the ground, because they look at us as being a predator. But if you start setting up camera traps in the forest, you will find orangutan walking everywhere, not only crossing roads like on this slide, but also in primary forest. They will walk when there is a gap between trees. And something else we witnessed at our site, where the orangutan, they have to face the fragmentation and degradation of their habitat, was this story of adoption by one orangutan who is called Felicity, the big one you see on your right, I guess, and the little one called Ocean. Ocean was Jenny's daughter, and as I mentioned Jenny earlier, Jenny passed 2-3 years ago now, and at this time Ocean was only 4 years old. We were not sure if the baby, who was only 4, would survive in the forest, because she had still so much to learn from her mom. And what happened is that after a few weeks, we were looking for the baby, of course, we met Felicity, who was with one auntie to Ocean. And actually, at this time, Felicity didn't have a baby yet. She was a young adult female, and she started to take care of the young one. And for nearly 2 years, these 2 females were together all the time. And Ocean survived. And I was in the forest last week, and I saw Ocean. So now Ocean is 8 years old. Felicity has her own baby. And so what we witnessed was really an adoption process by this young female. This was really, really interesting for us to see that. They have, in this kind of man-made landscape, orangutans, they have new type of issues. One of these, for example, is the fragmentation of the habitat they live in. As we know, orangutan cannot swim. None of the great apes can swim. So as soon as you remove, let's say, trees that are bordering a drain or small tributaries, orangutan cannot cross anymore. And this is fragmenting the population. We are living, Kinabatangan is in the floodplain. So this means that we have rivers dissecting the landscape everywhere. And this fragmentation because of small tributaries or drain is a real issue for the long-term viability of the population. So what we decided to do very, very soon when we started our project was to build what we call orangutan bridges. We worked with our zoo partners and we set up bridges above the small tributaries. And I can tell you that macaques in particular, pigtail macaques, long-tail macaques, they love our bridges and they love to play with our camera traps and take selfies and stuff like that. We have zillion of these type of pictures. It took us at least 2 to 3 years before we got that, before we got the ultimate proof that orangutan are using these bridges. So we found a way, if you want to alleviate, to mitigate one of the issues created by the fragmentation of the landscape. And now, of course, our team are setting up orangutan bridges wherever it is needed. I didn't mention earlier the 2 reforestation teams who are working for Hutan. So they are all made up with women. Why women? Because I think only women can really take care of trees. We tried with masculine teams. It was not a success, but as soon as we started to work with women in the village, they did an amazing job. And you know, it's super difficult to plant. I mean, to plant trees is okay, but then we have to maintain these trees for 2, 3, 4 years sometimes, and super, super hard work to do, especially when you are under the sun, for example, or when it's raining and every day you have to go back to your plots and maintain your trees. Anyway, these teams are really contributing to create safe passages, to create natural corridors across the landscape, to give a chance to species like the orangutan, elephants, and others. So why are we putting corridors in agricultural landscape? And this is what I would like to try to explain to you very briefly. Over the years, we have been following orangutan in the forest. We have been studying this species in the forest. Little by little, we realized that more and more orangutan were also penetrating, going into the agricultural landscape, primarily oil palm plantation. So at the beginning, we were very puzzled why orangutans are going into the plantation. And then we decided to start following them, which is very difficult because when orangutan are leaving the forest, they are becoming extremely elusive. They are hiding so well. It's really difficult for us to follow them. And what we realized, for example, is that orangutan are dispersing into this plantation. They go from one patch of forest to the next and they cross the palms. Sometimes they walk on the ground. Sometimes they move from one palm to the next and so forth. And actually, this behavior is happening more and more frequently. Of course, for an orangutan, you look at a palm plantation, it's food everywhere. They go there to eat, to feed on fruits. They go there to feed on young leaves from the palm. In this slide, you see that a palm has been a bit damaged by an orangutan. So this can potentially create problems and conflicts, something we are working on with growers to mitigate these conflicts. They are also using the palms to nest, for example. Here you see in this picture a young orangutan who was bending the palms to make a nest. On the picture below, you see palms that have been quite damaged by orangutan nest. And this is the kind of things we are now witnessing that we haven't really talked about yet. We find increasingly orangutan nesting on the ground in this type of landscape, which is a completely new behavior. And this shows how resilient, how adaptable the species is. Of course, they can do that, once again, only if they are not killed or shot or moved, translocated. Translocation is something I will touch on maybe later on. The orangutan will use this type of landscape as long as people accept to coexist peacefully with them. And then if we do that, this is the situation we get. In this type of landscape, some of the females, they start breeding, which to us came really as a surprise. So to finish and to conclude these 20 minutes or so of discussion, I wanted to explain to you what is our new understanding of the orangutan ecology in the Anthropocene in these new landscapes. So imagine a landscape where you have, let's say in this case, 3 protected forests, but where you have 3 different subpopulations of orangutan. The orangutan living in the forest who are close to the edges with the plantation are going to move back and forth between the forest and the plantation. These particular orangutans are not going very far in the plantation, maybe 50, 100 yards from the forest. They go there, they build their nests in the palm, sometimes are active at night to not see people. They will feed on fruits and so forth, and they come back to the forest. We are following a particular female right now. It's just amazing. She leaves the forest at 6 in the evening, just before sunset. She goes into the plantation. She makes her nest in the palm, and early morning, next day, she goes back to the forest. It's just amazing. So these resident animals who are living at the edge between the forest and the plantation are increasingly using this plantation, and they are making back and forth. Now, in this landscape, we also have small patches of forest that haven't been converted. And some of these forests are inhabited by orangutans, by females, and females are resident animals. Females don't move the place where they were born. That's why wild-to-wild translocation is not a good idea at all. If you move an orangutan from where he was born, a female especially, and you move her somewhere else, she's gonna die. So it's better to leave her where she is. And this is a beauty of it. I mean, at least the surprise of it. We see that some of these females are able to breed in these small islands of forest. So this means that we have males who are wandering, who are walking across the entire landscape looking for breeding opportunities. And if there is a female lost in the middle of nowhere in a small patch of forest in a plantation, well, the male will go there, and if the female is receptive, they will breed, and the male will go on, and the female will raise their kid in this patch of forest. And the fact that we have these small patches of forest and sometimes orangutan females there is super important, because this is an incentive needed by the males to move from one big patch of forest to the next. If we didn't have this movement of males across the landscape, all this protected population living in protected forests would be completely isolated. And this is a major concern for the long-term viability of what we call the meta-population, the population of orangutan living throughout the landscape. So yes, orangutan can, at least on the short term, adapt and survive in deeply modified landscapes. But sure enough, I don't say that they will survive in pure oil palm or rubber plantation. No. Orangutans, they need trees to survive. They need forests to survive. So one of our approach at Hutan is to really engage more and more with the oil palm industry, for example, to convince them of the value to plant trees within the landscape. So value for people, a value for the grower, of course, a value for the orangutan, a value for the biodiversity we want to protect. I'm going to stop my story today now. If you want the next episode, it will be at WCN Expo next fall, where we will explain why and how we want to diversify a landscape which is primarily dominated by oil palm plantation, and why this is so important to do that to save the orangutan. In 2 words to finish, orangutan is extremely resilient. So this is something we really need to integrate in our conservation strategies. They can survive in places that are completely transformed by people. They will do so only if we accept to coexist with them. As you know, orangutan are slow breeders. So if we start to kill them, the population will go extinct. If we start to move them because we think orangutan is in a better situation when he is living in a forest and and if we remove the female in particular that have been surviving in this fragmented landscape, we are really jeopardizing the viability of the population. orangutan need to stay where they are, and we need to learn as human beings how to coexist with them in those type of new landscapes. And yes, for me, I think I'm going to end my PowerPoint now. And please, I guess it's time for question. Thanks. Hello, hello.
Zoe, are you having problems with your video?
Is it okay?
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Thanks, Mark. That was amazing. And I was seeing in the chats people saying they're learning so much, and also the patience required to find orangutan. And I'm going to brag now. So when we went in June last year, we were looking for orangutans and we found one, and we were standing under a tree and I was like, actually, there's two. The team had been there following them for a while. They hadn't seen the second one. Everyone was like, no, there's one. I was like, no, there's two. So if this gig doesn't work out at WCN, I'm going to be finding a job with Mark and his team finding orangutans. So thank you for all those who put their questions in the chat. You can carry on. We still have time. So we're going to start with the first one is a two-parter from Tim. He wants to know, what are orangutans' natural enemies and whether poaching is a big problem for orangutans?
So actually, they don't really have a lot of natural predators. When they are small, they can be taken by a clouded leopard. There is a few examples where clouded leopard have taken young babies. Python, big python can take them. In Sumatra, tiger, of course, but that's about it. The major predator is people, of course. So let me backtrack a little bit. We know that people arrived in Borneo and Sumatra about 10, 12,000 years ago, and they brought blowpipe. What I do think personally is that before people reached these islands, I want to believe that orangutan used to be maybe more social and more terrestrial. Why I say that? Because if you look at orangutan in captive settings, they are completely different than the one we are following in the forest. In captive settings, they are always on the ground, they are social like crazy, but not in the wild. And I do think that something we cannot forget is that the orangutan we see today is a result of a co-adaptation, co-evolution with people for the past 10 to 12, 15,000 years. And so I do think that the orangutan has changed and has adapted his behavior and his ecology to the super predator that are people. Today, depends where we are. In Sabah, hunting is not an issue anymore. I say not anymore because it used to be in the past. We know, for example, when we did a genetic analysis of orangutan in Sabah, what is left today, which is about 10,000 individuals in Sabah alone, it's maybe 10% of the original population. So we have lost a lot of animals, but the decline started about 200 years ago with the Western explorers when they came and they started to hunt orangutans. They brought the guns with to Borneo and Sumatra, and this is when actually a strong decline started with orangutan. So in Sabah, hunting is not much of an issue. It's mostly the major issue we have now is habitat fragmentation. I talked about it during my talk. But in some places in Kalimantan, yes, hunting remains a major threat. So orangutan basically are killed for two major reasons. The first is when there is conflict, when people see an orangutan, they are afraid, or when orangutan are eating durians or bananas or palms and destroying the palms. Sometimes people shoot them, which is an issue that needs to be addressed. But we cannot forget that orangutans, and especially the females, are also shot for their babies because there is still a pet trade happening. And most of the orangutan who are fueling the pet trades are actually originating from Kalimantan, from Indonesia. So hunting is definitely the major threat in most places. But here again, depends where. In Malaysia, Sabah, Sarawak, hunting is not the major threat anymore. In Kalimantan, definitely yes.
Perfect. Risa would like to know whether the locals are receptive receptive of having orangutans in the communities near them?
Super good question. We all know that in the Western countries, orangutan, we all love it. Well, it's a completely different story in Malaysia and Indonesia. Actually, most communities who are working with, they know that they have orangutan, but that's it. Some people are still eating orangutan, as I said. No, I didn't. Okay, some people are still eating orangutan, not in Sabah much, but I mean, for most local communities, wild orangutan is a type of animal which is big, scary, that can destroy their crops. So actually, in many places, they don't really like it. You start to speak where we are working in Kinabatangan, and the people are fishermen. If we start speaking about fish, wow, they love it, and there's zillion of stories. If you go in the interior, where people are more hunter of maybe Hutan, the wild boar, the same. You speak about boar, and there are a lot of stories. Talk to them about orangutan, they're like, well. But having said that, when you start to really explain to the communities that orangutan are big, but they are so close to us, they are not dangerous, this is what you can do to prevent any type of accident and so forth, well, they start to realize that orangutan is unique. And also, of course, in places like where we are in Kinabatangan, tourism is one of the drivers for socioeconomic development, and people know that tourists are coming to see orangutans, to see elephants. So all of a sudden, the value of the orangutan is changing, and the perception of the orangutan is changing. But I have always been surprised to realize that in Borneo, Sumatra, I don't really know, so I cannot talk about it. But in Borneo, most of the time, local communities, they didn't really pay attention to the orangutan. Orangutan is there in the forest. We are here in the village. It's interesting.
Awesome. Ray would like to know if it's possible at all to volunteer in person with Hutan.
Unfortunately, okay, no. We have a community-based approach. So we welcome mostly Malaysian and Indonesian people. We don't usually welcome foreign volunteers. Having said that, if you're interested in volunteering with an organization like Hutan, you contact me. I can put you in touch with other organizations, even one working in Kinabatangan as well, where they are fit, they are designed to welcome foreign volunteers. We are not. We are really focusing on our efforts on Malaysian and Indonesian conservationists.
Okay. James would like to know how you have convinced the plantation owners and farmers to accept the presence of orangutans.
Well, it's a work in progress, okay? I mean, it's not all of the owners or all the plantation who are happy with the situation, but some of them who are more forward thinkers, they are willing to see and to accept the situation. So we are, I mean, as I said, I strongly believe in evidence approach, I mean, evidence-based approach. So we are following orangutan in the plantation. We get more and more facts showing that orangutan are using this plantation. I don't know if they can survive long term, but at least they are there today. And these are facts. So with this, we start to engage with the plantation and to tell them, look, this is what is happening. It's not only happening in Kinabatangan, it's happening all over the board. You like it or not, sooner or later, you will have orangutan in your plantation. What to do about it? So what they say, oh, we will translocate. So this is where we explain to them translocation, forget about it. It costs a lot of money. It's a failure and the animals are going to die. No, we need to coexist. And so that's why also we work on conflict, because if the orangutan are creating conflict, this is an issue. It seems that they do create some damages, but not that much. So I think that we can live with a certain level of damages created by orangutan in a plantation. It's not that big. And then little by little, the growers, they start to understand that orangutan can go there. And it's actually a win-win even for them. The problem is that so far, a lot of companies are afraid because they think, rightly so, if an orangutan comes to their plantation, the orangutan is shot dead in their plantation, wow, it will be a very bad PR internationally. So that's why we are really, it's a long, if you want, it's a long process to engage with these owners, with the industry, to explain to them, look, there are ways to promote better coexistence. And you know what? I was talking about orangutan and Malaysia. It's the same problem in the USA, not with orangutan, of course, but with other species. The problem now is coexistence, because we have fragmented so much the natural environment that all large mammal species in particular, so in our case, elephants and orangutan, but in your case, it would be the puma, it would be the caribou, it would be all the bear and so forth. They cannot and they won't remain in the network of protected forest. They will always end up outside of this network. They will always end up in places that are used by people. So the real issue now is coexistence. And so what we are trying to address with orangutan in oil palm plantation is really the same type of issues that we need to address in Western countries with other species as well. It's how in the anthropocene people can coexist with all these animals.
Thank you.
Sorry
Eric,
if I was wrong.
no, that was a perfect answer. Eric has a two-part as well. They'd like to know, what is your opinion on relocating orangutans to new, better forest environments? And what are the impacts of creating orangutan sanctuaries and importing the orangutans to those sanctuaries?
Okay, so more and more research is being done by our group, another group, and the Borneo Future Groups, about wild to wild translocation, and we show that it's really not working. So let me explain a little bit about this. This situation where orangutan come close to people is kind of happening more and more because of what I explained, because of the fragmentation of the habitat, because of the fact that people are shooting less and less orangutans. Orangutans are coming closer and closer to villages. And so when we have this kind of situation, in many cases, people are afraid that the orangutan is going to be shot or injured by villagers. So the government, Indonesia, Malaysia, the NGOs, they come, they catch the orangutan and release it somewhere in the forest, thinking that we do a good thing, good deed. Well, actually, it's just counterproductive. First of all, as I said, females are completely resident. Female orangutan will never leave the place where they have been born. So if you remove a female from the place she knows and you put her in the forest, in a place where she doesn't know anything there, she doesn't know the animals there, she doesn't know the resources, she doesn't know where to look for food, she will die. That's it. That's as simple as that. I don't think she can survive. Maybe once in a blue moon, one will survive, but most of them will die. The males who are caught in this type of landscape, you move them back to the forest, it will be the same for them. They won't have a room necessarily in this forest because there is already a lot of males. So they will just keep on moving and moving and moving, and they will end up outside of the forest again. So wild to wild translocation is definitely not a long-term solution. We can use it as a tool in certain situations only. And actually, for the IUCN right now, we are developing a new set of guidelines for wild to wild translocation of orangutan. Because funny enough, orangutan is one of the species in the world that is the most translocated, right and left, here and there. And it doesn't work, if you ask me. Rehabilitation is a bit a different issue. Rehabilitation happens for young, mostly when the mother has been shot or has disappeared. And so now we are entering a welfare issue. Of course, when you have a baby orangutan, what to do with it? Nobody wants to kill a baby orangutan, so we need to rehabilitate it. Then after that, after so long in captivity, they are released. No one really knows the success rate. I don't think it's very high. But at least when you release orangutan and you create new population, you protect more forest, which is a good thing. And yeah, here we are really touching a welfare issue. What to do with this young orangutan when they are seized by authorities after the mother has been killed? It's a real issue. So a lot of NGOs, especially in Indonesia, are working on this. As of today, there is, I think, nearly 1,000 orangutan in captive orphanages, in captivity in orphanages in Indonesia alone. It's just a lot, and it costs a lot of money as well. And yeah, this is a big problem. And here again, in Malaysia, Sabah Sarawak, situation is different. We have less and less orphans coming to the rehab center. I think in Sabah, for the past 10 years, it was 1 or 2 a year at most. Some years we don't have any. So this problem in Malaysia is kind of solved, but it's still happening a lot in Indonesia.
Awesome. Francine would like you to please talk more about the relationship of certified sustainable palm oil plantations and orangutan survival and the issues with unsustainable palm oil. And if you can touch on the differences between Malaysia and Indonesia.
Okay. Well, do you have 2 hours in front of you? So, okay, palm oil is not a simple issue. Let's accept this. And since it's a very difficult topic, there is not a single easy answer to it, okay? Because when you are facing a difficult question, a difficult topic, there is no easy answer. So people who think boycott is the way forward or this or that, no, it's not that simple. It's not the way at all. I firmly believe that certification is the way forward. So certification, I mean, as you all know, I guess, can apply not only to oil palm, it can apply to many other commodities, and it should. When a product is certified, this means that the production chain is following a certain type of, certain list of criteria and principles. So it ensures better practices. My point is that we need to have better practices. Palm oil is a very good product. Produces a lot of oil per surface area. So it's a beautiful crop. Problem is practices. We need to improve practices. This is where certification comes in. So there are several types of certification for palm oil. We have national one, MSPO in Malaysia, ISPO in Indonesia, and of course, we have one international certification body called RSPO, the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. Well, over the years, we have seen differences happening between certified and non-certified companies. I would say overall, certified companies have better practices than non-certified companies, and this is good. And this is why I think we need, as buyer, we need to promote certified companies, certified oil. For example, in Europe, just very recently, a law was passed. Only oil certified by RSPO can be imported. And this is a type of legislation that really sends strong signal to an industry, in this case, the palm oil industry, because if they want to import their goods to Europe, they need to be certified. They need to have better practices. So this was the background information. So relationship between RSPO certification and orangutan, well, we are using, of course, orangutan as a flagship species, and more and more we are engaging. Hutan is one of the members of the RSPO. We are engaging, of course, with RSPO to improve their management of orangutan and also their management of biodiversity overall within certified companies. Work in progress. The certification label is not perfect. There is still a lot of things to develop and a lot of progress to be made. Having said that, if I compare the oil palm industry to other commodities, soy and so forth, well, I do realize that in terms of social and environmental impact, the oil palm industry has done a lot of progress compared to other commodities where there is no certification. So I know that a lot of criticism occur against this industry, but because of this, I have seen a lot of improvements over the years. And right now, I would say the oil palm industry is far ahead of the game compared to soy, for example, which is destroying South America, or cocoa in Africa. So yeah, that's why I said it's really, it's not black and white. It's kind of gray, and it's work in progress. We all need to work on these things.
Yeah. Well, from that complex question to an easy one, Susan would like to know what you estimate the current population of orangutans in Sabah, and if it's stable, increasing, or decreasing.
Okay. So it's an easy question, but very difficult to answer because, of course, to survey orangutan or other type of great apes, it's very difficult. So for Sabah, we have developed a way where we use helicopter, so we can't nest and we can survey huge areas. So to answer your question, Sabah, about 10,000 orangutan, and they are stable, and some population are increasing. And I think, I mean, seriously, in Sabah, orangutan is not going to go extinct. I don't see why it will, because we have 28% of the landmass fully protected. 1/3 of it nearly is totally protected in Sabah. And this is where we have about 85% of the orangutan population. The rest are living in a forest exploited for timber, but certified by FSC, for example, where everything is under control. So in Sabah, the situation was good, except in one place, Kinabatangan, where I work, because in our case, even if we have a lot of protected forests, they are all fragmented. And the fragmentation is an issue that I tried to explain to you earlier. So this is for Sabah. Sarawak, the other Malaysian state, about 3,000 orangutan, same, all of them living in protected forest. So far, so good. What is left in Sarawak seems to be well maintained. Of course, Kalimantan, the Indonesian part of Borneo, is where you have the most orangutan, maybe 50, 60, 70,000, who knows. The problem in Kalimantan is that there is still a lot of deforestation happening as we speak, and a lot of this population are still declining. So if nothing changes in Kalimantan, I would say we may lose maybe half of the current number in the next 20 or 30 years. Having said that, it's not, some population are going to survive as well. So you don't believe people who say in 10 years orangutan will be extinct, because this is just not true. What is true, though, is that in 10 years or 20 years, we may have lost maybe another half of the current population in Indonesia. But we will reach a stage, a point where the orangutan numbers will stabilize and little by little will go up again. And in Sumatra, to finish with them, we have two species. So one, the Sumatran orangutan, mostly found in protected forest in a Gunung Leuser, I think 15 to 20,000 left. The major problem is the Tapanuliensis, the species that was described a few years ago. We know that only 800 or 900 of them are left in a protected area, but there is this project to develop a dam, a hydro dam there. And if the project goes on, this means that this population will be split in two, and there will be a lot of human activities. So this particular population, this particular species is really under threat of extinction, but not the Bornean, if you ask me, not the Sumatran. Although, as I said, if we cannot change the tide, more orangutan are going to disappear, but some population will be maintained. And as we see in Sabah, some population are starting to go up again.
Awesome. Well, Kerry would like to know, what is the most special thing that you have observed about orangutans during your time with them in the wild?
Their eyesight. It's just amazing. Although, of course, they are quite far away from us. But, you know, when you spend time in the forest and you look at them, and sometimes they sit and so we have our binos, so we have a close look to them. I mean, seriously, these guys, they think, they look at us sometimes, they think. That to me are just a complete mystery. And there are, I talked about their resilience and their behavior. Something that I love to talk about with our teams of researchers is the different personalities that we have been able to witness between every single individual, especially the mom, the way they raise their kids. Some of them are very strict, some are very lenient, some are very severe. And they have all a different way of taking care of their kids. And of course, our teams who are following them on a daily basis, they know that, and they speak to me about this orangutan as if they were part of the family. And this is just what I find super interesting with the orangutan. It's like, they are really special to us, I should say.
That's amazing. Well, none of this work is free, so let's talk money. What are some of your financial needs for 2023, and how could a donation of $50 help?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, we have, for example, we need money to recreate these corridors of forest, so to plant trees and to maintain the tree. Planting a tree is very cheap, it costs maybe $1. Problem is that if we don't maintain a tree, it will die because of all the grass and so forth. So we do a maintenance work for 3-4 years. And so this costs a lot of money to maintain the tree, but we want to make sure that the trees we are planting are going to survive and create more natural habitat for the orangutan in this type of landscapes. Of course, we always need small equipment, small material, field work for the field work. So, and we need one of our, it's very funny, not funny, but one of our costs is petrol. That's why, because we do all kind of, all our movements are by boat, and boat is really consuming a lot of petrol. That's why we also plant a lot of trees to compensate, and petrol is very expensive. So we always need money for running costs. And yeah, I mean, Hutan is relatively small, even if we are more than 120 people. So most of the donation, I mean, to not say all the donation is spent here on site in Sabah. And we don't have a huge administration cost, meaning that all the money that is given to Hutan goes to the field, goes to the community, goes to the protection of the forest, protection of the orangutan, and so forth. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you heard him, folks. And I'm sure Megan has put the link for donating on there. Please do what you can. We've come to the end of this amazing talk, and I saw in the chat that people said they could listen to you for 2 hours. So good on you. I think it's the accent, Mark. It's not.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's not you. It's the accent.
Yeah, even I mean, through my, I mean, despite my accent, why? Thanks,
Cool.
guys.
Well, it is the end of this seminar, but you can actually catch Mark at our Fall Expo on Friday, October the 13th. So please keep an eye out on our website for details about the expo. And finally, be sure to join us on August 18th at 12 p.m. Pacific, when we will be in conversation with the team from the Painted Dog Conservation. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Have a great evening or day, depending where you are. Mark, go have some more coffee. We are going to go to bed. Thank you so much to everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot for listening to me. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right.
So do we stay here?
So different.